and welcome to Our People, the podcast where we give space for Holdeman stories. We focus on hope, healing, and inspiration. Connection, consciousness, and love are the driving motivations for this project. Remember to have grace for those who have chosen to speak out and share their experience. Please enjoy the story you will hear today.
Hello, and welcome to Our People's podcast. This morning we have with us Roberta, or as her grandchildren lovingly know her as Mamzy. She is here to share her story. I am your host, Amanda, and with me is Weylin. So, Mamzy, if you want to go ahead and share your story, we are here to listen.
Thank you. Thank you very much for allowing me to have a little bit of space to be able to share what I went through. I'm 64 years old, but before I start my story, I want to say that I hold no ill will or harm towards anyone. Not that I have forgiven those who have done harm towards me. I also want to make people know that the people who adopted me have passed on. May they rest in peace. I have forgiven, but I hold the memories, so I will never repeat them. I have friends and family who I consider family still in the church, and I respect their beliefs. I wish everybody healthy and happy and loving existence, and may you all find peace within your lives. I was 9 months old when my birth mother, left me and my sister at Hilltop Mission home. Hilltop Mission was started in 1959 by John and Lily Friesen of Crooked Creek. I was sent there or dropped off by my birth mother for a week, she said, so that she could come to Edmonton and look for a job. She had a TB appointment, which TB was very rampant with the Indigenous people at that time. And she wanted to look for a job. She had a ride to come back, and she signed a paper saying she would only be gone a week, and she would be picking up her children. Well, her ride fell through, and she ended up staying in Edmonton for 2 weeks until she was able to come back. When she came back to pick us up, she was told that we were no longer there. She was told that we had been adopted out to the United States.
Who told her that?
The girls at the home. They were, I would say, anywhere from 18 to 25, maybe. Just young girls, looking after the home at that time. I don't know if there was house parents there. I do remember a couple of the women. One I know has passed on. She was fair. She was fair, but she had a mean streak. The other one I remember very clearly. She was very mean, very, very mean. You got to remember, I was young. I was 9 months old at this time. My birth mother, went to Montana because she heard that we were there, and she lived in Montana for a while. But she told me that she never lived more than a month at a time in certain places because she was looking for us. She looked everywhere for us. She heard we were in Thompson, Manitoba. She went to Thompson for a while. She heard we were in Vancouver. She went to Vancouver for a while. She was looking for us. Meanwhile, we were all still at the home, at Hilltop Mission home.
What? So
whoever was...
You had never so they outright lied to her about where you were at? They lied
to her, yes. And I will get a little bit more into that further on down in my story, because we did end up going back to Hilltop when I was a bit older. When I was age 3, we went back to the farm in Crooked Creek. John and Lily adopted me. Well, they took me and my sister. They didn't adopt us. They took us to this farm in Crooked Creek where we lived. I remember the first night we were in this big double bed, and during the night I rolled off. I landed on the floor and I was too little to crawl back in the bed, and my sister wouldn't help me. So I laid on the floor, and in the morning I remember them looking at me and laughing because I was laying on the floor. I had no blanket and I was so cold. But they just laughed at me. They thought it was funny that I was laying there and that I wasn't on the bed. And I had been crying and nobody would come. I remember they had this big old table, and it had kind of a square post in the middle, and the legs kind of came out so that you could sit on the top of the leg, and I held onto the post. I remember hiding underneath that table. I was watching the feet walk around the table, and nobody asked where I was. Nobody seemed to care where I was. And I fell asleep there. I remember hanging onto that post and listening and waiting, but nobody looked for me. When I was at Hilltop, I was about 1.5 years old. I was still in diapers. I was potty training, and the girls sent me out to the outhouse with an older boy. He was 15 or 16 at the time. And he took off my diaper and he put me on this wooden bench with a hole cut in it. It was an outhouse, an old outhouse. And he proceeded to put his penis in my mouth and told me to suck on it like a candy. I didn't know what to do. I kind of just sat there with my mouth open, and he says, suck on it, suck on it. I'm kind of started gagging. And then he pissed in my mouth. I got sick. And I threw up all over myself, all over the floor, all over the seat where I was sitting. The girls got upset with me and brought me out a pail of water, and I had to clean it up. And I was crying because I couldn't understand what was happening. I just knew that whatever had just happened, I didn't like. I saw him take other girls to the bathroom. And I used to watch, and then he'd see me watching, and then he'd mimic. He says, you want to go? He'd point to the outhouse, and he'd say, and then he'd pretend that he was getting sick with his hands, and then he'd laugh about it. I don't know whether the girls knew about it. I suspect that they did, because after he had done that a couple times, taking other little girls to the outhouse with them, they wouldn't let him near us anymore. So I suspect that they did know something happened or something was going on. I don't know for sure, though. I cannot know what was going on in their heads or what they were thinking. I had older people who looked after us. John and Lily were older. And they were very, 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 very hard parents. Like, I didn't ever feel that I was loved. I felt like growing up, I always felt like I was just there as a hired hand kind of thing. you brought us here so we could work, so we could plant flowers, we could make the yard look nice, so we could plant a big garden, and we make sure that garden was weed free, make sure that the trees we planted were weed free, make sure that the flowers were all weed free. It was always a lot of work on the farm. It was always outside. It was always planting grass and mowing the grass and making sure that nothing was growing except for what was supposed to be growing, like the fruit, the vegetables, and the flowers and things like that. I was probably about 4 years old, maybe. And they were building onto the house. So they were putting steps that went into the basement, and the people were there, and they had put steps up, but they were temporary steps. And Lily fell down. She fell on top of the steps, or she stepped on the steps and the whole steps went down. So she was laid up in bed for about a week or two. And I remember crying because I was so scared they were going to send me back to that Hilltop Mission home, because she couldn't get out of bed. She had hurt her leg or her back or something. I just remember being so scared that they were going to send me back there. I was so fearful of everything. It was around this time that John started coming into my bedroom at night. And I was already married when I realized what was going on. I knew something was going on, but I wasn't sure what. Because I remember having these dreams of being in a corral, sort of, and these big barrels were rolling over me. It wasn't until I was married that I realized there was orgasms. This happened until I was probably just before I turned 12. I remember around the age of 12, I was laying awake in my bed, and he was standing outside my room, and Lily had came up, and Lily asked him what he was doing, and he said he was praying for our souls. He had just left my bed. So I don't know whether she suspected something or not. When I was old enough, I went to school. I think I was 7 when I started school. It was public school. We didn't have church school yet. It wasn't, the church schools didn't start until I had left school. And that was a couple years after that, I think, before they started this church school. School was hard for me, really hard. I was one of the only Indigenous kids there. I am Indigenous. And all the children at the children's home in Hilltop Mission were Indigenous. I have met quite a few of the kids that were there I've talked to them, and we've talked about the abuse that happened there, and how they felt, and how they felt having to always wear dresses, because that was the only thing I was allowed to wear as a kid, was dresses, and of course tights. But I made this friend. Her name was Roberta Cramps. Roberta and I became best friends. We told everybody everything. I told her about what was going on at home. about what was going on with John and my coming to me at night. And she said that didn't sound normal to her, but she says, I don't know. But I made her promise, and she made me promise. She told me things that I've never ever told anybody, because she made me promise never to tell anybody. It was a secret. She was in school one day and she was so cold and she had a headache. And nobody could come and pick her up. She went to the nurse's station and she was laying in bed there. And I went and looked, and she was just shivering underneath the blanket. And her parents couldn't come and pick her up, so she had to wait for the bus to get home. So I watched her go onto the bus. And that was the last time I saw her. This is a Friday. Tuesday morning, I was told she had passed away on Monday from meningitis. I wanted so badly to go to her service. She was my best friend. But her service was being held in a Catholic church. And all the other kids used to tease us, so we used to always wander off by ourselves and go and sit somewhere and talk and play with rocks and play with grass and whatever, just to get away from all the teasing, because that's all they ever did was tease us. They teased me for being only wearing dresses and being Indigenous kid. How come I was brown and my parents were white? And that they made me feel like I was less than of a person. And they teased Roberta for being poor and being the oldest of, I think she had 5 brothers and sisters at that time. And how she always came to school and she looked dirty and she looked this or that. And for being a bit poor. So we used to hang out together and just go off and do our own little thing. All the kids were able to go to her service, even though they teased her. And I used to bug me because I asked, why are they allowed to go to her service? And they didn't even like her. And yet she was my best friend and I can't go. And the reason I got given was because it was being held in a Catholic church. And we were Mennonites and we couldn't go to that church. Around that same time, I remember drawing a picture. And I was angry. I was so angry. I was angry at everybody for teasing me. I was angry at what was going on at home. I was angry that I couldn't go to this service. I was just angry. I drew a very, very dark picture. And the teachers took it to John and Lily. Oh, did I get beat for that picture? I was told I could no longer ever draw pictures like that. It had to be of the sun, it had to be of a house, it had to be of flowers, it had to be a happy picture. I couldn't draw what I wanted to. I had to draw what they wanted me to draw. I used to get beat almost every night. People call it spanking. To me, it wasn't a spanking. To me, it was a beating. I used to have welts and bruises on my body constantly. And I would get beat until I admitted that I did something. I don't know what I did, but I would get beat until I said that I did something. So they taught me to lie. They taught me to lie. I didn't do something, but I got beat until I admitted that I had done it. And then I got beat because I did. Those beatings, when I was young, I swore that I would never, ever have kids. And if I did, I would never, ever treat them the way I was brought up. I would never, ever, ever do the same thing to them as what was being done to me. I always felt left out, especially after Roberta passed away. I wasn't, like I said, they taught me to lie. So I would lie. If somebody would say something, yes, yes, I'm happy all the time. Always happy, always yes, everything was good. Because I couldn't tell them my true feelings. I had to bury those true feelings. So I always grew up feeling left out, even around the other Mennonite kids. They would tease me at school. And then we'd be in church and they'd try to be my friend. And so I always kind of, why do you want to be my friend? If you can't be my friend while we're in school, why do you want to be my friend? Because we're around our people, as they call it. It didn't make sense to me. It really didn't. I remember spending a lot of time outside and looking at flowers and amazed that creator could make something so beautiful, and walking around chasing the cows, trying to get them to come home to be milked and things like that. And I would take my time. But if I took too much time, then I was being lazy. So then I'd get beat for that. We had chickens. I remember having to go out and get the chicken eggs. And always getting picked at because chickens, they don't like to give up their eggs. But I would have to take the eggs and wash them. I'd have to milk the cows and separate the milk. And we had a couple of dairy cows, Jerseys, I believe they're called. They're the brown and white cows. They give off a lot of cream, a lot of cream. And so we'd always have to separate the cream from the milk and make sure that we saved all the cream. And I don't know, I remember people coming and picking up cream. I don't know if it was sold or whether it was gave away or whether it was barter. I don't remember. I just remember always having to do that. I remember having to get up early morning. Every morning I'd have to do chores before I went to school. And then you'd barely have time for breakfast, and you'd have to pack your lunch before you caught this bus. So as I got older, I had to walk to school because I was too old to take the bus. We were only a half a mile away from school, but I had to finish my chores before I went to school, and I had to make sure that I had a lunch pack in order to go to school. And sometimes I was running late. I'd just grab an apple or something and run out the door. That was my lunch for the day. So I'd always find a little spot away from everybody else.
So what was Lily doing while you guys were doing all her work for her?
Oh, she was in the house. She was cooking or whatever, like she always seemed to be in the house. Sometimes she'd sew, dresses. Oh my goodness. As I got older, I remember having to learn how to sew. But I remember John kind of being around, making sure that the animals were fed and stuff. But it was my job to make sure that the chickens were looked after, that the cows were milked. As their youngest son used to live in the farm with us, and he had a room across the hall from us. And as he got older, he started a pig farm. He started raising pigs, built a big, huge barn and just loaded it with pigs. Well, then the teasing got even worse because I smelled like pig barn all the time. And couldn't I shower before I came to school because I stunk. And I used to hold back my tears and just try to stuff everything down because I'd be walking home. I remember walking home one day and this school bus drove by and the kids were leaning out the window and telling me to go home and shower because I smelled like the bar. And it wasn't only worldly kids, as the Mennonites like to call them. It was also the Mennonite kids. So as you can see, I felt very left out, very alone. All growing up, I felt like I was the only kid in the world that had been adopted. I was a different color than my parents. I remember one thing that springs to mind is I was probably in grade 1. And I came home from school one day and I asked Lily, I says, how come I'm brown and you're white? And she says, oh, well, that's from all the mud puddles that you played in, the mud soaked in. I remember sitting in the bathtub with a scrub brush and just scraping my skin so that I would be white like her, trying to wash off my color. Well, I've came to appreciate my color. I've came to appreciate who I am as an Indigenous person. But we'll get into that. I was baptized at the age of 12. 12 years old, you don't know what the hell you're doing. Sorry, I shouldn't swear. There had been a song or a call for anybody who felt that they should give their life over to Christ or to God, as they call him, and to please stand up. And I didn't stand up. I watched all the other girls around me stand up. After the service, one of the older girls, I think she's a couple years older than me, she came to me and she says, we're all going to get baptized. She says, and I think you should too. And I said, why? She said, well, if you don't do it now, she says, I don't think you ever will. That has always stuck with me because I thought, what if I hadn't? Would my life have really changed? Would it be different? But I went home and I thought about it and I talked to John and Lily about it. I said, the girls want me to get baptized. It wasn't I wanted to. They wanted me to. And they thought it was such a good idea. Oh, yes, yes, please. Please. It's time you give your life to the Lord. So I did. I think there was 10 or 12 of us that got baptized. And the preacher's wife comes up there and she shakes her hand. And I thought, and she went to give me a kiss and I turned my cheek and she pushed my head back and she planted one right on my mouth. And I'm just kind of, my feelings, my heart just sank. Because I thought, oh my God, it's starting again. Because of what I had experienced with John. John and Lily were never big huggers or kissers or loving people. They were never just take you in their arms and give you a big hug. So I associate that with immediately, oh my God, she's going to do what John did to me. That was my thinking. So I really had a problem with the holy kiss, as they called it. To me, that was abuse. This old woman giving this 12-year-old a kiss right on the mouth. And I can still feel their wet lips just, oh, sorry, it just kind of grosses me out. I think about it now and I'm still kind of going, because to me, that is abuse. And in a way, it's abuse. I remember going to members meetings because I used to think, oh, I'll get baptized and I'll be included and I'll be part of the congregation and oh, they're gonna love me. I'm gonna be so accepted. Little did I realize that I was a pariah. They didn't want anything to do with me because I lied. I was given $5 a month, and that was supposed to get me whatever I needed, whether that be tampons or pads for my monthly grandmother visits, or whether that be pantyhose, because we had to wear pantyhose to church or if we wore pantyhose to school. We wore pantyhose all the time underneath our skirts because we were too old to wear leotards or stockings. And we couldn't go with bare legs. God forbid, go with bare legs. So I would wear pantyhose to school. And sometimes if they got too many runs in them, then I would take out my church pantyhose and I would wear those. Well, this $5 a month back in 1972, was not enough to make sure that I had pantyhose for the whole month. So I started stealing. I would steal Lily's pantyhose, or I would go babysit someplace where this lady would sell pantyhose, and I would steal pantyhose because I needed pantyhose. But John and Lily didn't. And I asked them if I could increase the money that I got as an allowance to help me. Could I get at least $20 that'll help me keep my pantyhose and making sure that I had enough in my pocket to make sure that I had what I needed, deodorant and things like that, things that you need as a young girl. But no, we're giving you this much. This is enough. So that's why I became a pariah. Nobody wanted anything to do with me because I was a bad girl. I didn't see myself as a bad girl, though. I was just trying to survive. I was just trying to fit in. I used to always have to go to youth meetings. Oh, I hated those. Because to me, the Crooked Creek was very cliquey. You had your groups of friends, and you'd go to join them, and they'd kind of turn away from you, like subtly telling you at their body language that they didn't want you in their group. So then I'd go and stand by myself. But then I'd get home and I'd get punished because I was standing by myself. I wasn't socializing. How can you socialize with somebody that doesn't want you there? So, the abuse. My Lily's brother's son and Lily's sister's daughter came over to play one day. I was, yeah, I was 12. I had just been newly baptized into a church, and they were too, they were baptized into a church. And so they wanted to play doctor. And I says, okay, so I went and got my dolls. I said, oh, we don't want to play with dolls because they were a bit older than me. That's babyish. That's babyish. We don't do that. So, okay. And they had me lay on the bed, and they were one was going to be a nurse and one was going to be a doctor. Well, the nurse, my female cousin came in, and she says, well, we got to get you ready for the doctor's visit. And I said, what do you mean? And she says, well, you got to take this off. She says, and she made me undress. And then she covered me up with a sheet. And she says, this way the doctor can examine you and you'll be covered. And I says, okay. And I didn't really click into what was going on. To me, it was just different. It was different. Like, I thought, this doesn't seem right. This feels kind of odd to me. But I went along with it. I did what they asked me to do. So she goes out into the hallway. She closes the bedroom door, and I'm laying on the bed with the sheet on top of me. And she says, okay, cover your eyes. So I pull the sheet up over my eyes, and I could hear them. And they come in and they're whispering and they're talking to each other and stuff. And then all of a sudden they yank the sheet right off of me. I'm laying there totally naked, and I'm just starting to blossom. And they're feeling my breasts and they're feeling my stomach, and they put their fingers up inside my vagina. And they're feeling around, and she says to him, so what do you think? And he says to her, he says, well, I really like you a lot better. You're not as ugly, he said. That really caused me many, many years of body shaming. I felt so ashamed of my body because my body wasn't pretty. I wasn't built like other girls. I didn't have the Barbie figure. I never have had the Barbie figure. I've been more straight. Some would say that my body is built more like a boy. And that's okay, because that's how my mom was. After that happened, I got dressed because I felt just horrible. I felt so sick to my stomach. And I went downstairs and I went to see Lily, and she was busy in the kitchen, and I wanted to talk to her, and they followed me. And they stood at a sight of the kitchen, but I could still see them. And they told me in sign language, don't say anything, do not say a word, because if you do, we'll kill you. And they made the sign across the neck with their finger. In other words, don't you dare say a word. I watched them when we played around with the other community kids. I watched them touch other girls' private areas, whether it be their breast or their vagina area. And how I knew that this had happened was because the girls would cover themselves, their vagina area, with their hands. And that is a very classic sign of abuse, that they have been touched. I remember seeing one girl holding herself and laughing. I don't think she knew exactly. She knew it was wrong because it made her feel weird. But she allowed it to happen, as did everybody else, because they were older kids. They knew what they were doing, right? They were supposed to be older. They were supposed to be teaching us. It wasn't until after I had left the church that I heard that that her father, my female cousin's father, had caught them in this little wood shack that my male cousin had built. My male cousin's brother had built. And he had a little bed in there and table. And he used to go out there and kind of his books and be in solitude. And he smoked out there and whatever else he did out there. But he had a bed out there too that he used to sit on or lie on. He had some books out there. And I guess they were caught together out there. I don't know what they were doing, but I can only imagine. I have never, ever got an apology from them. When they were caught, because I was no longer in the community, I was blamed for what they did. They said that it was that I had taught them this. Which happened a lot. Therefore, the beatings every night, because the kids would be caught smoking. I had gave them the cigarettes. They were caught drinking. I had got them the liquor. I wasn't anywhere near them. I had nothing to do with them. But it was me who was the problem. I was the one who did all this stuff.
Because you were different and you were easy to pin it on. They needed a scapegoat because, God forbid, they actually admit to the fact that their children were capable of these kind of acts on their own. That
Exactly.
is a story old as time.
Exactly. So I would get beat for it. When I was, I think just before I turned 13, we went back to Hilltop Mission. And John and Lily were house parents. They saw me as baptized into the church. I'm going to be a missionary. I'm going to encourage all these other Indigenous children to come to the church, to be part of God's only church. I used to have to go to different communities and give my experience. You know what? I've been listening to the other podcasts and they talk about their experience and what they had. And some say that they didn't feel that they had one. I remember having something happen when I was 9 years old, but I do not recall what it was. I do not remember, but I had to repeat this over and over and over again. And I used to stand there and think in my head, why am I doing this? Like, this happened when I was 9. Like, it doesn't make who I am. And yes, to them, it's, oh, this divine experience. But I honestly do not remember what it was. Anyways, we went to Hilltop Mission. I did try to make some friends there. One lady now lives in Newfoundland that I got very close to, and I really enjoyed her and her sister's company. And it seemed like I finally had friends. or take care of these children. John was in the wood shop with three of the boys. And the youngest, I was happened to be in the kitchen getting something to drink, and the car pulled up. And I went running back into the bedroom to keep the kids quiet. And when I came back out, the car was leaving, and this young boy came running from the wood shop and ran to the car, and the car pulled back up. And the other two boys came out of the woodshed to the car, and it was the parents, and they pointed towards the house because I guess they were asking where the other kids were. And they came to the door and wanted the girls. And the people, John or Lily wasn't going to give them, Lily and the girls were not going to give them the girls. And so they ended up calling the police, and the police came, and we had to give the girls back to the parents. But they were very upset about that, because we shouldn't have to give the kids back to heathens who are Indigenous parents who were just going to drink and throw their lives away and not look after these kids. So I remember that when I was 12 years old. I also remember this young girl who came. She's my brother's wife now, but she came, and she had to stay in the basement because she would not put on a dress. She only wanted to wear pants, and she had to stay in the basement, and they took her food down there, and that's where she was. And she was there for about 2 weeks or 3 weeks before she was let go back to her parents or to some other place. But yeah, you had to put on a dress in order to stay and be considered part of the home there.
So I had a question about John and Lily. So if they had several families of children, why was it just you and your sister that they took in? Or were there
Yes.
other kids?
No, it was, well, there were other kids, but it was just they'd stay for like 2 or 3 weeks at a time, and then they'd go off someplace else. It was just me and my sister who was there permanently.
Okay.
The other kids, I don't know whether they said something or did something, but yeah, they weren't there for very long. But also, I wanted to bring up the children's home that was in Crooked Creek. I have cousins that went there, and I've talked to them about this. They're all older now. Auntie Mary's boys, she had 5 boys, and they talk about the girls at the home abusing them, coming into their bedrooms at night and abusing them. So it's not only the men that are abusers in this cult, it is also the women, and it is girls. It is young girls that are from 18 to 25 or whatever age they are at that time. They look after kids. I've heard quite a few stories along that line, because I've asked, were you ever abused by the Mennonite church or by people in the Mennonites when you were in their care? And they've all told me yes. And they've told me stories. To be able to talk about it. And I am far from being healed. I never will be healed. Not in this lifetime. But at least I don't have to take it on to my next lifetime. I'm going to leave it here. But this is my experience, and I've told my children so they know, and they know what I went through, so that they can watch their children, so that it stops with me. It doesn't go any further. Anyways, I was living on the street in Grand Prairie, just hanging out because my auntie had kicked me out. I no longer had a job because I had no place to live. And I remember my friend Anita. coming up to find me. And she says, "Oh my God, I found you, I found you." She says, "Oh yes." Well, she wasn't 18 yet. She had ran away from home. Her parents came to find her and hauled her, kicking and screaming, back into the car and took her home. Oh, when she turned 18, she came and found me again. And we used to hang out together, just going wherever, doing whatever. We were in Grand Prairie. We had been in Edmonton, and we were in Grand Prairie. She was in Grand Prairie. I was in Edmonton, and we were hanging out with another friend, Brenda. And we decided to go hitchhike back to Grand Prairie. Well, I was with Brenda, and Brenda says, "You go ahead," she says. "I'm gonna go and see if I can get a little bit of money, and I'll meet you in Grand Prairie tonight." So I said, "Okay." So I started hitchhiking. I managed to get to Grand Prairie. It was late, and I found Anita, and I asked her the next day. I says, "Did you hear from Brenda? Did you?" And she says, "No, nothing." I said, "Well, she's supposed to meet me here." And a couple days later, we found out that she had been murdered. She was found on the side of the road in the ditch. This this was really difficult time for me because I had no place to go. I had no place to call home. I was just kind of bouncing around. I was hooked up with this older guy. I was living with him for a while. And Anita had came to Edmonton. And she hadn't been drinking. And she decided one night to have a drink. She phoned me. She says, "I'm coming to Grand Prairie." She says, "Tomorrow." She says, she says, "Can we meet up?" And I said, "Yes." And she says, "I found out what happened to Brenda." And I said, "Oh, okay." She said, "I'll tell you when I see you." She's had one beer. And they said that she passed away from alcohol poisoning, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I found out about a week later that because she never showed up, and I was kind of wondering what the heck. And my friend comes in. We were living in Wembley at the time, and he came in. I was in Grand Prairie, and he says, "Your friend Anita has passed away, and I need you to know that." So then I'd lost everybody. Anybody I cared for was gone. I had nobody left, absolutely nobody. So I went down a really dark path. I started drinking, started doing drugs. I didn't care. Yes, there are times where I thank Creator for watching out for me, because if it hadn't been for him, I wouldn't be here today. During this time, John passed away. And I heard that he had passed away. So I went out to Crooked Creek because I wanted to see him in his box before he was laid to rest. And we went to they were having a wake at Wilbert's. That's where John was. And I remember them not wanting me there. And I insisted that I be allowed to go and see him, because I wanted to make sure that he was dead. Because the final I had been hanging around Edmonton, kind of doing what I needed to do, wanted to do, just doing everything and anybody. And I finally had enough. And I thought, no, I've had enough. I want to go home. So I called John and Lily, collect call, and the operator said, you have a call from your daughter, Roberta. John had answered the phone and he says to the operator, I don't have a daughter named Roberta. And he hung up. That was the last time I ever heard from him. So I had to go see that he was actually dead. There was no tears. I remember looking at him and my sister said, how come you aren't going to cry? And I said, why? Why? She said, well, that's your dad. I said, no, he was never my dad. He was a man who may have raised me, but he was not my dad. Shortly after that, I met and married my husband, James. There was a lot of drinking, a lot of drugs. But at least I found somebody who wanted me. He asked me 9 times to marry him because I kept saying no, because I didn't think that I was worthy of having anybody in my life that would love me or wanted to be with me. That's how low my self-esteem was. I had none. All I thought I was worthy of was having sex with a guy. And then he'd kick me out in the morning or kick me out that same night. That's all I thought I was worthy of. That's what I was used to. So I finally agreed to, yeah, if you ask me this many times, he says, this is the last time I'm ever going to ask you. He says, will you marry me? And I finally, fine, yes, I'll marry you. God. I don't know why we have to get married, but okay. So we got married and we had a little boy named Jordan. And Lily came with Wilbert and Rebecca to meet Jordan because I hadn't phoned them and invited her to my wedding. I said, I'm getting married this Saturday. Can you come? And this is like a Tuesday. And we live in Fort St. John. So Crooked Creek is not that far away from Fort St. John. It's only like 4 or 5 hours. It was, and she kind of went, oh, well, I don't think I can make it. Well, fine. I said, well, I just thought I'd let you know I'm getting married. And you're welcome to attend. Nobody showed up. It was
How old were you when you got married?
23.
Okay.
I was just a baby. And I had Jordan when I was 27. So they came to visit because I had this baby boy. They wanted to meet this baby boy. And so James and I are in the kitchen and we're putting together some cookies and some tea and coffee and stuff. And, I thought, you want to shun me? Oh, yes. You always want to shun me when I'm around. You don't want anything to do with me. You want to ignore me. Well, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to serve you in my living room so that you don't have to sit at the same table as me. I never did talk about when I was expelled. I left home, and it was probably about 2 months, 3 months later, Lily and John called me, asked me to come home for dinner. And I said, okay. So I went back. Well, just finishing dinner and 2 ministers pull up. And I looked and I went, oh. So what do they want? Oh, Lily says, I don't know what they want. I don't know why they're here. I went, okay. So they come in and they tell me that they expelled me. And I went, oh, okay. But I cried. I absolutely cried because that was the last string that held me to that community. Now it was severed. I had nothing. I had nobody. Anyways, they all were in the living room, and I brought out a tray of cookie, or a tray with some tea and cups on it and cookies, and I went back to get the coffee pot because in case anybody wanted coffee, so they had a choice, and they're all gathered around my marriage license on the wall, and I'm kind of looking at it, what the heck? Why are they looking at that? And they're whispering among each other, and they're talking. And I bring out the coffee pot and set it down, and they turned around. It was like somebody had switched on a light. They were so happy to see me, and I was so welcome, and so good to see you, my girl, my daughter. And I'm kind of going, who are you people? It was all because I did not have a child out of wedlock. I was married when I had my son. That's, I still have to chuckle about that on their reaction, because what does it matter? You bring a beautiful soul into the world, you should be rejoicing over that soul and that beautiful human. It doesn't matter whether the parents were together or married or not married or whatever. You have a beautiful, beautiful soul. Anyways, Jordan was a year old when he suffered a stroke. And we discovered we were sent from Fort St. John to Vancouver. At 6 months old, I started noticing changes. Like he would change colors. He would go really yellow, he'd go green, he'd go really white, almost purple, like a light purple, and then he'd go yellow again. And I took him to the doctor, and I told the doctor, I said, something is wrong. Please do whatever tests you need, because something is wrong with my baby. Well, he told me that I needed to see a psychiatrist because it was all in my head. I was seeing things. So he had a stroke, and I called James at work, and I asked him, I said, can you help me get to the hospital? Something is really wrong with Jordan. So he picked me up. We went to the hospital. Jordan's laying on a little hospital bed, and he's kind of crying very weakly, and I said, he doesn't want to eat, there's something really wrong with him. And the doctor that examined him, came to look at him, was the same doctor that I had seen when I was pregnant with him, but not the doctor that delivered him. And so she says, whose baby is this? I says, mine. I says, and she says, is it the lights in here, or does he look yellow? And I grabbed her shoulders and I said, can I hug you? I said, thank God somebody could actually see. I said, I thought I was going nuts. I said, she says, no, his coloring is off. And she did all kinds of tests. They did x-rays, they did CT, they did MRI, took blood work. They did all the tests that I had been asking this doctor for. And he's in the children's unit in the hospital. And I sent James home. I had done laundry the night before. Our washer wasn't working, but our dryer was. So I'd washed all our clothes and put them in garbage bags and was going to dry them at home because it was cheaper for us, right? So I told him, I says, okay, this is what I want out of these garbage bags. Can you please dry them and put them in a small bag for me? I says, I need something because we're going to be sent out. And the doctor came Dr. Beckett came and told me that she was sending us to Vancouver because something was wrong with Jordan and she couldn't quite put her finger on it. So the doctor I had been seeing came and looked at him and says, "Oh, it's just a virus. They're sending you to Vancouver, but it's a waste of taxpayers' money because you're going to be home within 2 days." And I looked at him and I started yelling at him and I says, my child is dying. Does this look like it's all in my head from? I said, you're telling me that this is all in my head? I'm watching my child die here and this is all in my head? Well, Dr. Beck happened to come by when I was yelling at this doctor. And she came in after he left and she asked me what had happened. And so I told her. And so she called him and she said, don't you ever go near a patient of mine again. She says, you stay away from her. Well, we went to Vancouver and that was the last time I saw my home in Fort St. John. We ended up staying there. When I got the news that he had leukemia, I came out of the room because I laughed at the doctors. I says, you're kidding me. I says, okay, tell me what's really wrong with my son. And they said, no, he has leukemia. And I said, no, he can't have. I said, no. And I walked out and there was 2 Mennonite women standing there, Darlene and Sandra. And they had been girls that had grew up with my sister in Crooked Creek. So they knew who I was. And I saw them and I immediately burst into tears. I didn't want to cry, but just their looks on their faces, and I couldn't help it. I thought, these are people I know. And I cried. I said, they think he has leukemia. They're testing him for it. And so they spent a little bit of time with me, and then they went and got me some dinner, and then they left. The nurses got me I guess he was a reverend, or it wasn't a priest, but it was like somebody from like an Anglican or United Church or something. I guess it was a reverend or preacher, whatever you want to call him. I don't know. And he says, I hear you may have had some bad news. And I sat there and I cursed God. And I was so angry. I was so angry at God. How could God do this to my beautiful son, to my precious, beautiful son? Like, why? It took me a long time to find him again. Many years. Anyways, Jordan was my rock bottom. Because when we were in emergency room, they had him in isolation. I had to go to the bathroom. And I walked past the emergency doors and went to the washroom, and did my thing, and I was standing there. And I thought, oh, I'm in Vancouver. I can leave Jordan. He's fine. He's with the nurses, he'll be okay. No worries. I could go out for a drink and not have to worry. I'll come back later. And I looked in the mirror and I thought to myself, I didn't recognize that person in front of me. And I thought, I'm looking at myself and I said, who the hell are you? You're going to leave your baby boy in the care of people that you have no idea who they are, and you for a drink? That was my rock bottom. I walked out of there and I looked out the doors as I'm walking by, and I went and I picked up Jordan and I cried. And I cried and I cried. And I thought, how could I even think this? Was I really that weak? That's all I could think of was going for a drink and leaving my baby there. He's only a year old. How could I think this? Well, we ended up staying at wasn't the Ronald McDonald House, it was Easter Seal House. And I tried to get a hold of James, and I phoned his work, and his work said, oh, he quit his job. And I'm kind of going, he quit his job, well, he must be out drinking then. So I tried phoning the bars, and nobody had seen him, nobody. And I got a bouquet of flowers delivered to the desk, and I kind of thought, well, who nobody knows I'm here, like, who is sending flowers? And here's this beautiful bouquet of flowers, and on it said Tree B. James is from Prince Edward Island, and he doesn't pronounce his H's in three, so it's Tree B. So I knew it was from him, but I didn't know where he was. And a couple days later, the nurse comes in and she says, you have a visitor. And I says, really? It says, who? I says, nobody knows I'm here except for these two Mennonite women. And I thought maybe they had came back to visit. And she opens the door and there's James. And I ran to him and I told him, I says, Jordan, they say Jordan has leukemia. Yeah, it was a hard few months for us. But during this time, the Abbotsford Mennonite Church started coming around and really talking to James. And somebody on the podcast mentioned this, and I said, that was it. That they love bombed him. He was so welcome. He was everything, like, yes, do anything for you. We'll help you do it, whatever. You want us to buy you a house, we'll buy you a house, basically is how it felt. And he came home one day and said that he was thinking of joining the church. And I looked at him and I was absolutely horrified. I said, if you join that church, we're done. I says, you go, you join that church. You have a good life there. But I says, do not come around me or my son. No, he didn't understand that. And so I explained a little bit of what it was like for me growing up. And I said, there's no way that I want to be around that ever, ever, ever again. So he didn't join. Jordan passed away in 1990, a month before his baby sister turned a year old. Actually, I'm wrong. He passed away November 28th of 1990. Jasmine, his sister, turned a year old December 8th. So just before she turned a year old, he passed away.
How old was he?
He was 3.5. He is my angel in heaven. Jasmine, I'm so glad I had her. Creator, even though I was angry at him, He made sure that I had something to hold on to. Because if it hadn't been for her, I wouldn't have got up in the morning. I wanted to take her and I wanted to die. And the doctor gave me some pills and I thought I could put some in her milk. And I could take some and we could both go and be with Jordan. But I thought I can't rob her of whatever life he has planned for her. But I was still angry at him. I was angry. I did. The Mennonites came around and they tried praying with us, and I didn't want nothing to do with the prayer. I didn't want nothing to do with their church. I didn't want nothing to do with anybody. My mom came, my birth mother came for a while, and she stayed with us, and she talked to my uncle up in Yellowknife because things were happening around the house that were kind of odd. And my uncle up in Yellowknife talked to her on the phone and said, "You tell her that his spirit is still around and that it's coming back in a healthy baby girl." I didn't know whether, he says, in a year or two. He says maybe longer, but he says, yeah. So I tried everything to get pregnant. No, not happening. Jasmine is 6.5, 5.5 when I got pregnant with my daughter. And she, in so many ways, is like Jordan. So many ways. Very intuitive, that girl. Very, very intuitive. But he's still my angel. I still feel him around. He likes to play hide and seek with us. He hides things on us all the time. We can't find things, and we will look everywhere. And then we'll go back to where we thought we last had them, and there they are. So he will hide things, and sometimes it takes us a few days to find it, but we find it. Like I said earlier, I had failed grade 9, and we had moved to Prince Edward Island, James and I, and the 2 girls, in 1999, 98, 99. Anyways, I went and wrote my GED so that I could have my grade 12. And from there, I applied to university. I was the second highest in my math and science class. I was the highest in English and history. And there was 5 subjects. So math, science, language arts, history, and I forget. Anyways, 3 of the subjects I was the highest, and the other 2 I was the second highest. So I figured that was pretty good from somebody who failed grade 9. I cried when my my teacher, gave us the results. And because I told her, I says, that's not possible. I never finished school. How could I be this high in these subjects? And she says, because you read a lot. Reading became, it didn't matter where I was with Jordan. When Jordan was in the hospital, I started reading. And I read anything I could get my hands on. I was always walking around with a book And if I went for lunch or something for a cup of coffee, I had my book and I'd have my cup of coffee and I'd be reading. And so in 2000, Lily passed away. And I was in university, and the people that were sponsoring me actually got me, Jasmine and Jaleesa, each a round trip plane ticket to go to Grand Prairie and see her. We had to pay for James because he wasn't status or Indigenous. He was white, very white. So we had to pay for him, which was okay. Like my sister helped out and paid for his round plane ticket so that he could come. He was going to fly with the girls. I flew out. There was only one seat available. So I flew out Thursday night, and he came Saturday with the girls. Well, that was my nephew met me at, or my brother met me at the airport and took me to the hospital with my suitcase. I had no place to go. Didn't know what to do. And I was there. And so I decided to spend, because everybody was kind of, well, we spent the night last night. I don't really want to spend the night tonight. So I said, fine, I'll spend the night. I said, it doesn't matter that I just flew all day, but it's okay, I'll spend the night. And this is a Friday night. And Lily and I had a little talk. And she said to me, she says, I am so sorry for how we treated you. And she says, John, before he passed away, said that he really was sorry for what he had done and asked if you could forgive him. And she says, I wish we had never treated you the way we did. And I told her, I says, it's okay. I forgive you. I forgive you.
So do you think John confessed what he had done to you?
He did to Lily. He was expelled when I was still at home, but I don't know why. When I asked about that, I was told that he had smoked and drank when he was young, and that's why he was being expelled. That was the reason I was given. I don't know whether it was because of what happened with me, but when he was expelled, that's when things really turned for me, and nobody wanted anything to do with me. Nobody wanted me around. And I wonder if that went around the community, but nobody said anything to me. And I was just a kid. I was just a kid. I don't wish that on anybody. Because even though I was in the church, it was like I was expelled. Avoidance. That was avoidance. I was in the church and I experienced that. My friends, I had no friends, had nobody who would want to hang out with me. Nobody, all the girls got invited to each other's places for sleepovers for the weekend, for, let's go hang out, let's go play, not me. If I asked why not, I would said, oh, mom only, they'd tell me, mom only allowed me to have so-and-so over, or so many people over. I'm sorry, but you can't become. So people talk about, on the podcast, talk about avoidance and having, and not being able to eat with their loved ones. Well, try having that while you're still in the church. Anyway, I wanted to tell you about what happened with Lily. I spent Friday night with her, kind of slept on and off Saturday. Saturday night, all the family came in, and we had talked a little bit, and I was the last person to talk to her, because after I talked to her, then she had another stroke, and then it was just garbled, and not really any nonsense, and but the rest of the kids came in, and Wilbert and Rebecca brought all their kids in, and Robert came in, and Verge was there. So everybody was leaving for Saturday night, because the church on Sunday. They had to make sure that they were going to church on Sunday. So Saturday night, I'm sitting with Mom, and I'm tired. I am tired because I didn't really sleep. Like it was on and off kind of thing, and people would come in and check on me, make sure I was still there. Kind of, where am I gonna go? I'll be at the hospital here with somebody. I'm not gonna just disappear. And well, I thought maybe you went back to your room. I said, I don't have a room. I didn't have any accommodations paid for me because I didn't have any money to pay for it. So I had nothing. I didn't even have any meal money. My people had just managed to get me a plane ticket, and that was it. And so the nurses felt sorry for me and kind of slipped me an extra tray, things like that. Anyways, I'm sitting with Lily Saturday night, and it's probably about 1, 2 in the morning, and I can see her aura. It's a blue aura, and she's crying silver tears, and she's shaking her head, and she's putting her hands up like, no, I don't want to see this. I don't want to see this. And I took a Kleenex and I said to her, I said, Mom, it's okay. And I'm dabbing her cheeks because I wanted to wipe away those tears. I said, it's okay. And I realized there's no tears. It's her aura that's crying. I'm seeing her aura cry silver tears. And then she finally nodded, and then she became more at peace, and because I told her, I says, it's okay, I'm here. And if you need to go, you can go. I'll be okay. I'll be okay. And so the doctor came in. I kind of fell asleep beside her, like I was laying on the bed beside her. And the doctor came in and he asked who I was, and I told him. And he looks and he says, you need to call the rest of the family in because it's time for her to go home. And so I called them all in, and I'm watching the sunrise in the glass buildings by the hospital. You see the sunrise, and I'm watching this, and Chris, my birth mother, and my auntie came in, and they said they came to pay their respects. And I said, oh, and Auntie Mary says, we saw an eagle fly over the city this morning. And so we came in. And I said, I'm watching the sunrise. Out of the corner of my eye, I see Lily, and she's talking to somebody. And she sits up and she's talking to this person at the end, kind of at the edge of her bed there. And then she lays back, and then she sits up and she's kind of getting upset with them, saying no. And she's pointing to her leg, and she's pointing and she's saying, like, it's not working, because she had had a stroke. And so then she lays down and she takes her right leg straight up into the air and then puts it back down. Then she sits up and she looks at it and she looks up and she laughs, just laughs, and then she lays back down. And as I'm watching this, I see something leave the room. So when Wilbert and Rebecca and Robert all came in, and they're looking, they're going, what do you mean it's time for her to go home? We need to get Ridge Valley. We need to get a hospital bed in there. We need to get a 24-hour nurse. Maybe they can do shifts. And they're talking all about sending her back to Ridge Valley home, where she had been. And I said, no, she's going home. Not home to Ridge Valley, she's going home. And so I tried telling, I said, I saw something, I saw her leave. And they said, no, you didn't. No, you didn't. And so my Christine and my aunt and I decided to go outside. We're going to have a smoke. And so I'm talking to them and I said, this is what I saw. And they said, well, the reason we came in is we saw an eagle fly around Grand Prairie. You don't see eagles in Grand Prairie. Very, very seldom do you see eagles in Grand Prairie. And so I'm told her this, and my aunt, and they're both looking at me like I'm going an eye out of my third eye out of my forehead or something. And I says, what? And they said, tell us this again. So I told them again, and they said, your grandma had that gift. And I says, what do you mean? And they said, she had the same gift you do. She was able to see things of people when they're scared and they're going to pass over and they're scared. They'll come to you first and you will guide them. And I went, but what if I don't want that gift? Please, I don't want that gift. And they said, it's not up to you. Well, I went back upstairs and Robert is holding Lily's hand. And her breath is getting slower and slower. And so I asked, I said, can I hold her hand? He said, oh yeah, sure. So I'm holding her hand when she stops breathing. But her heart is still going because of her pacemaker. So they came and stopped that. And I was holding her hand. But I needed her to know that even though all those years I'd been hurt, that I forgave her. I forgave them. And I truly believe that those silver tears that I saw was her reliving and seeing what had actually happened to me as a kid. When after Lily passed away in 2001, we moved back to Manitoba, and we started work with Maple Leaf it was Maple Leaf in Brandon. They helped us move back to Manitoba. Well, I transferred my university to Brandon University. And while I was going to university, through my education, I realized that my marriage was very codependent. Codependency in a relationship is where one person involved is mentally, emotionally, physically, or spiritually reliant on the other person, which can lead to very dysfunctional relationship patterns. And psychologically, a negative life experience is a victim of emotional neglect or abuse. That made a lot of sense to me because I was that person. But my ex-husband, he's an ex now, by the way, my ex-husband had also been in a very abusive childhood home. So we both were very unhealthy for each other. We divorced, we were separated in 2003. In November of 2002, I found out I had bone cancer in my leg. And I went to Toronto and I had surgery for that. I didn't ever have any radiation or chemo, but I've always been a 15% chance that it will return, which is very good for that type of cancer. But my leg is still very weak. I fell and broke it in 2021. I broke that knee. So I've had surgery on it a couple times. Now I need to go and have my knee replaced, which will have another surgery. And I've had to quit smoking because of my surgery, which is when I was 18, I started smoking. So for 46 years, I've smoked. So it's been very difficult for me. It's been a struggle. However, that aside, that's when during my education, I got into the First Nations and Aboriginal counseling program at Brandon University. That's where I started my healing journey. That's where I found Creator. And I prayed and I sat down one day and just on the bench outside of university, and I said, I don't know if I'm doing this right, but please help me. If I'm supposed to be in this marriage, then please help me find peace within it. Please help me so that it won't feel like such a struggle, and that I'm walking in eggshells all the time, and that I'm not able to be there mentally and emotionally and physically like I feel I need to be. Please help me that I can find what I need to find, and that I can help him find himself. That's when my marriage fell apart. Creator started showing me signs of, no, this is not for you. This is not where I want you. There was one exercise that I really recall. We had to lay down on this big piece of white paper, and somebody traced our outline on it. And then we had to draw how we felt about that person. All our struggles, all our abuse, all our physical and mental and emotional traumas. And then we had to bring it before the class and talk about it. That was very, very hard for me to do because I'd never, ever opened up to anybody about my abuse. if anybody asked, oh, I was a really happy, good home. It was very happy. I was so excited. Yes, like this was a real eye-opener for me to see that I was not the only person that suffered abuse. Mine may have been a bit harder and more destructive than others, but we're all healing. We're all starting to heal. And I have found a loving creator, not a God-fearing one like I was raised with in the church, that fire and brimstone sermons, and you're too scared to even not read your Bible or not do whatever, and you just needed to be a good Christian, and so you do whatever you had to do in order for others to see you as a good Christian, whether that meant lying or putting on a false face, whatever. It's this creator that I found is not like that. He's not judgmental. I'm able to pray anywhere. I can go outside into the bush and scream and yell and rant and rave and lay my tobacco down and say, I'm here. You want to take me, take me. You want to help me? Please help me. And I found that he has helped me with my family a lot. I found friends and family among my peers, among my friends. I don't have anybody not wanting to be around me now. I don't have to worry that I am being excluded all the time, because now they just want to include me. Getting to know Christine, my birth mother, she passed away in 2005, was a blessing. I got to know that I was loved and that she wanted me. It was not, oh, it was none of this, oh, well, she didn't want you, so aren't you glad that we adopted you? Aren't you glad that you're in this one and true church, so that you have people that love you here? That wasn't the case. In 2000 and I want to say 9, I met this man, in 2005 when I was home to lay my mom to rest, Christine. And I felt I just started to get to know her when she passed away. I met this man, and I thought it was my cousin I was talking to, and he introduced me to his father. And I turned away for a moment because something else caught my eye, and I looked back, and this man is completely white. This Indigenous man, completely white. And he said something to my cousin, and my cousin says, oh, I'm going to take Dad home. He's not feeling very good. It's okay. Well, in 2009, I went home to my aunt's, who was in the hospital, and she was not going to make it. And I'm standing in her hospital room, and my cousin comes in and stands beside me, and we're holding hands because that's how close we felt to each other. And my auntie comes up. My auntie comes up and she says to me, you brother, sister, to me about me and my cousin. And she goes, hee hee, and off she runs. I looked at her, but I said, what? And he says, I don't know what she meant by that, he says. So I went to see her later. And she says, Henry's father who is my cousin, who I thought was my cousin, his father is your father. You're actually brother and sister. So I met my father at Christine's service. The man who I stood beside and turned white was my father. And he didn't realize that it was actually me, because he thought I was, he says, "Are you Virginia?" I says, "No." And he says, "Well, are you Dawn?" I says, "No, that's my younger sister." I says, "I'm Roberta, I'm the middle one." He didn't realize that I was who I was, because he told me, my brother told me later that his dad always thought that I got killed, that I was gone. So it was very interesting for me to meet him. And he passed away in 2006. But it wasn't until both of them were gone that I could find out. And that was a condition from my mom and my dad both, that nobody was to know that who I was until they were both gone. And it was to protect me. And I understand that now. At the time, I didn't understand it, but now I do. When I think about the Holdeman Mennonite Church, and I often hear, "Oh, I'm Christian." What exactly is a Christian? So that sparked my interest yesterday, and I had to look it up, because I don't know. I've often heard people say, "Oh, I'm a Christian, I'm a Christian." Well, that word Christian sends chills down my back, because that's what I was brought up with. "Oh, we're Christians, we're Christians." Christians to me equal abuse. So I had to look it up, and a Christian is a person whom Christ dwells within, a hope of glory, a personal relationship with Creator or God. I have a personal relationship with Creator, but that's my spiritual person relationship. I do not need to go to church, and I do not need to go to pray with others in order to pray and to have a spiritual relationship, because my relationship is with my Creator. That's between me and Creator, nobody else. I find that the church is a very patriarchal system, whereas in the Indigenous community, if you really look back into history, it's a matriarchal system. So the way I see things today, and my brother always bugs me about this, is he'll say something about his wife being below him, that God is here, is above him, and his wife is below him. To me, that doesn't make sense, because Creator has made women out of Adam's rib, not his head, not his feet, but his rib. That means that they're equal. It's a yin and yang relationship. Now, whether that be female male or male male or female female, or however, whatever sexuality that you choose to see yourself as, that's the way it is. It's a yin and yang relationship. One thing that I did hear from my brother was that churchmen will tell their wives what to wear and how to dress. So we often see a woman, and you're kind of going, "Oh, I wouldn't wear that because look, it's too short, or it's too long, or the sleeves are too fluffy, or whatever." but it is the men who are telling the women how to dress. I found that very interesting. And I just found that out. I talk about forgiving myself or forgiving others. I had to forgive myself in order to be able to forgive them. Because I took a lot of that on for myself and I always felt that it was my fault, that I had done something wrong for this to all happen to me. And I had to finally accept myself and say, no, you did not do anything wrong. You were a victim. Now you are a survivor, and you have to forgive them, because I wanted to forgive myself, and I had to forgive myself. Today we talk about, with the other podcasts, I noticed that you all talk about where you are in your healing journey. Like I said earlier, I will never be healed, but I'm working on it. And I follow the 7 teachings of the medicine wheel and the grandfather and grandmother, Mother Moon and Grandmother Moon, Grandfather Sun, Mother Earth, and Father Sky. We have humility and wisdom or bravery, love, honesty, truth, courage, and respect. If we don't respect ourselves, we can't respect anybody else. If we don't have love for ourselves, we can't love anybody else. And if we aren't honest with ourselves, we're not honest with other people. And we don't have that humility and that wisdom, then we're not following what Creator has given us. Our balance is from all 4 aspects of ourselves, being spiritual, emotional, physical, and mental. Jordy's story really resonated with me, because listening to other people's stories on the podcast, I agree that the Bible was written by man. And it may be Jesus's words, but how often were they spun around to be able to fit into how they perceived it? And Doreen's story, I'm so sorry, Doreen. I wish I had said something. I totally understand. And quite often, the kids know what's going on as far as sex goes with the parents. My nieces and nephews, when they were growing up, they would come to me and tell me that they used to hear Wilbert and Rebecca having sex and what position they were in and what they knew. How did they know this stuff unless they were there, unless they saw it? And they did see it. And they would often come and tell me that they would listen at the door. So kids know what is going on. And you just have to be very, very careful. I know with my youngest granddaughter, she came in here a bit ago, and she came home from school, and she came in to change and say hi. She is very astute and very aware of what's going on. And she knows how other people are feeling even before we know how we're feeling. So be aware of that with your kids. You think that they're just children, that they don't know anything? They know everything, and they are not. They are willing to tell you if you are asked. So please, just if anybody is hurting or being hurt, please shout it from the rooftops, and don't stop saying something until somebody listens. And as far as the church goes, I think that needs to come out, and it needs to come out really strongly so that it will be stopped. And so other kids that are growing up in that cult, as other people have called it, will not be hurt and harmed. So that's it for my bit. Do you have any questions?
I don't. But thank you so much for sharing your story, for being vulnerable and open with us. Weylin, do you have any questions?
No, I don't think so. I just wanted to say the same thing. I just really appreciate the spirit that I feel coming from you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for allowing me to have a little bit of time. I know I went way overboard, but I thank you for the time that you have given me to be able to tell my story. As I told when I first applied or talked to you about coming on the podcast, I wrote my book. I'm going to send it off to Amazon, I think, and see if I can get it published that way. If anybody's interested, it is called The Lucky One, a memoir of the 60s scoop woman by Roberta McKinnon. So please look on Amazon for that. That will be in the next month or so. Okay.
Beautiful. I will definitely be buying a copy.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, that goes into a lot more detail than I have shared on here. I kind of just scooped over the highlights, but yes.
That is beautiful.
Thank you for listening. It is an honor to connect with our guests, and we wish the best for them as well as our listeners. Remember to like and subscribe for more episodes. Our People can be found on all major podcast platforms as well as YouTube. If you are interested in sharing your story, please contact us at ourpeoplepodcastteam@gmail.com. Thank you.